Hi everyone, welcome to our community webinar series. This is Gabby from Jet Foundation. We are so excited to have Italfarmaco here today to give an update on their Givinostat clinical trials. We're just going to wait another minute or two here to let folks sign on, and then we'll kick off this webinar. Thank you so much. All right, welcome again, everyone. This is Gabby from Jet Foundation. We are so excited to be hosting Italfarmaco today for our community webinar series. They will be updating today on their Givinostat clinical trials. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Dr. Paolo Bettega to start off this presentation. Thanks again.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for the introduction and for giving us the opportunity to update Jet Foundation on where we are in the development of Givinostat. As usual, let me start with my disclaimer. I'm an employee of Italfarmaco, who is the manufacturer of Givinostat. Givinostat is currently in development for the treatment of Duchenne and Beckett muscular dystrophies, and it's not approved for sale in any country, including the United States. And this presentation is intended for dissemination and discussion of scientific information only. This is a brief the description of what I'm going to discuss today. Firstly, I'll share with you our understanding of the role of Givinostat in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Then I will be reviewing the long-term study results. And finally, I will be presenting where we are with the ongoing clinical trials. Okay, let's start from our understanding of how Givinostat works. As you are very well aware, in the muscle, we have a repair system that once a muscle or more muscle fibers are being injured is actually triggered, and after the completion of all the activity of the repair system, then the muscle returns to the normal situation. As we know, in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, because of the absence of dystrophin, this repair system is actually not working appropriately. So as a result of that, there are two events that occur in Duchenne. One is that because of the lack of the effect of dystrophin against the damage of the muscle fibers are being injured more frequently. And the second one is that the repair system actually does not work properly. So instead of actually replacing the injured fibers with new muscle fibers, the injured fibers are being replaced by either scar or fat. And this actually leads to the impairment of the muscle, which is well known for Duchenne. Well, the way we believe Givinostat works is actually acting on this repair system. So we believe that on one hand, it's reducing the inflammation that is triggered by the damage of the fiber. The second event is that it is reducing the fat and the fibrosis replacement. And the third event is that it is actually stimulating the regeneration of muscle. And so as a result of that, we believe that is going to reduce the fat replacement and scars in the muscle in Duchenne patient. Let me then share our knowledge about the drug, which is really coming out of different years of work, both at the preclinical level and at the clinical level. So preclinically, we have actually shown that in the Duchenne muscular dystrophy mouse model, so the MDX mice, Givinostat was able to increase the muscle fiber diameter, so making the fiber bigger, to reduce fibrosis and inflammation. And this, which was observed by histology, was translated into a better performance of the animal treated with Givinostat. We then actually moved into a phase 2 study that was started some years ago, and with the objective to see whether we could see exactly the same effect also in the muscle of Duchenne patients. And the answer is yes. We were actually able to see that the same results that we had obtained in the MDX mice were replicated in humans. And also, what we were able to show was that not only we could see this improvement using histology, so in a small piece of muscle, but these were also confirmed by using the MRI. So if you're looking at the morphology of the muscle obviously in a macroscopic way. The other important thing of Givinostat is that we have been working on this drug for quite some time and in different indications. So as a result of that, we have been treating more than 600 subjects in clinical trials. And obviously that has allowed us to learn more about the tolerability of the drug and its side effects. And the side effects that are more frequent are listed there. One, you probably know it already, is platelet count reduction. This is a lab finding, and that is the reason why we have more frequent lab tests at the beginning of the study. But this can be managed by if you're adjusting the dose to the patient. Then we have some GI side effects like diarrhea, abdominal pain, and vomiting. Recently, we have noticed some increase in triglycerides. This is a new finding that we are following up by testing it at different time points in our studies. I think what is important is that all these side effects are mild, and so they can be managed appropriately within the clinical trials. The study which I mentioned before, the phase 2 study, actually started a few years ago. So after that, we actually asked the kids that were in the study whether they wanted to be part also of the extension study, and actually all accepted at the end of the first part of the phase 2. And so kids that were originally with an age between 7 and less than 11 years that were on stable corticosteroid treatment and then were treated with Givinostat are now being followed up for more than 7 years. And so we can now actually look at whether the treatment of Givinostat on top of steroids might have an effect on some of the key milestone of the disease. And you are well aware that the key milestone is actually loss of ambulation. And so we can compare our results to the one that had been published by the Synergy group, which are on the left-hand side of the slide. And here, sorry, let me use the. So here you can see are the results that have been published by McDonald and colleagues. And as you can see, the mean age at loss of ambulation for kids treated with steroids, which is the red line here, is actually 13.4 years. If we replicate the same approach to our kids, so the kids that have been treated with Givinostat on top of corticosteroids, the mean age at loss of ambulation is actually 16 years. So these results are suggesting that there is actually a delay in a key disease milestone when you treat kids with Givinostat on top of steroids. As these kids are growing older and are now young adults, we can also look at other parameters which become more relevant with the increase in age, and these are clearly the respiratory function. So we have been measuring the key spirometry parameter throughout the study every year. And here you see the results for the forced vital capacity. So how much the lung expands and receives air. And the PEF, the peak expiratory flow, which is in essence a parameter which is related to the function of the diaphragm, so of the most important muscle of our respiration. And we know from published data that both parameters are usually declining with growing age at a rate which is approximately around 5% every year. And as you can see, if we look at the results obtained in our study for the FVC percentage, so the forced vital capacity, the decline is 1.7% every year. And actually for PEF, we are seeing no decline. So also here, these data are suggestive of a beneficial effect also in another important parameter, which is respiration. Okay, so let me then switch to what is Italfarmaco trying to develop in the different muscular dystrophy. Here you can see the list of our pipeline. Duchenne is certainly the most advanced indication where we are midway in the phase 3 study. We are actually completing a study in Beckett Muscular Dystrophy, a phase 2 study, a proof of concept. And then we have another molecule which is in the early stage, so in discovery, that hopefully we can bring to clinical trials in the next few years. Okay, let me then switch to the ongoing clinical studies and update you on where we are. So as with what regards to the APD study, which is our phase 3 study, so the one that hopefully will be the cornerstone for the registration dossier. This is a study where kids are being randomized to receive either Givinostat or placebo in a ratio 2:1. So the kids will have more chance of receiving Givinostat than placebo. And then they are being followed up for 18 months. At the end of the 18 months, the final visit will be conducted with the key parameter that we'll see in a second. And then all the kids are being offered to transfer to the open label extension study where all patients are actually receiving Givinostat. The primary objective, as you see here, is to demonstrate that Givinostat preserves muscle mass and delays disease progression. And you can see more details if you want in clinicaltrials.gov. A few more information regarding the study, regarding the inclusion and exclusion criteria. As you can see, we have included kids that were able to walk, so ambulant kids with an age of 6 years and above. They had a genetic diagnosis of Duchenne. They had to perform the forced stair climb within a certain time, no more than 8 seconds. And then there were also some other limitations based on functional tests, like the time to rise. They had to be on steroids, on a stable dose of steroids for at least 6 months. And as we have been using MRI extensively in the study, they had to be able to do an MRI. The key exclusion criteria are the standard in this type of studies. Obviously, we were excluding kids that had been that were on investigational drugs or in drugs that had been approved for Duchenne. Also taking other medication that could affect the muscle strength and the muscle function were exclusionary. Ankle contracture was a key exclusion because obviously that affects the ability of performing the four-step climb. We didn't want to have surgery during the study, so if surgery was planned, that was exclusionary. And obviously, despite having Duchenne, obviously we selected patients that were not too compromised on other situations like the heart function, for example. The parameters that we have been looking at during the study are listed here. The four-step climb is actually the primary endpoint in the study. But as usually in this type of study, we have actually measured and performed all the functional tests that you're quite well aware of. So the North Star, the time to rise, the 6-minute walk test. We have measured strength. And as I was mentioning before, we have actually measured MRI at baseline, 12 months, and 18 months. Then there were a number of other parameters that were being collected at each visit, like the physical examination. We were taking blood for safety reason. Pulmonary function was actually measured at the beginning and at the end of the study, and the same was true for heart function at echocardiography. One important thing is that the study drug is actually an oral suspension. So it was taken at home by the kids in the morning and at night. So where are we with the study? Well, the study, we had a pre-planned interim analysis that was conducted to see whether we could continue the study, so futility was not met. This was actually defined by the independent data monitoring committee that last year gave us the go-ahead because the futility was not met. At the same time, we were able to re-estimate the sample size needed for the study. And because the variability of the primary endpoint was actually less than what we originally thought, we were able actually to reduce the sample size significantly. So enrollment is now completed since the end of last year, and we are actually expecting the final data in the second quarter of 2022, so in June next year. As I was mentioning, the kids that will complete the EPID study will be allowed to transfer to the open label extension study, which is described here. The primary objective of the study is to confirm the safety and tolerability after long-term treatment of Givinostat. But as usually in this type of study, we are also measuring the long-term effects on the functional test, on strength, and the impact on daily activities. And in the right-hand side, you see the scheme of the study here. Also here, we have more frequent visit at the beginning to adjust the dose in each patient, then followed by a visit every 4 months. And here are the parameters which are being followed up. Obviously, all the tolerability parameters, so adverse event, ECG, vital sign, lab. But as I mentioned, also pulmonary function test, the functional test for ambulation, and also the functional test for the upper limb. As I mentioned before, we are also conducting a study, a phase 2 study in Beckett. This is summarized here. Also, this one is a double-blind placebo-controlled study. Also, in this case, the patient with Becker are randomized 2-to-1 to Givinostat and placebo, so more frequently to Givinostat. And then they are being treated for 48 weeks. And here, once again, we have MRI at the beginning. At the end, we are actually taking a muscle biopsy here to see also the effect of Givinostat at histology. And then the standard functional tests are being performed also in this study. You see here the enrollment is completed, and actually now also the in-life of the study is completed. And we are expecting the results in few weeks. We will share as soon as they arrive. Just one mention, because I think is very important, is to look at what has been the impact of COVID on our studies. At the moment, actually, the situation is certainly complex, but it has not severely affected our study. Our study could continue without the problem. We didn't have patients that suffer significantly from COVID. We actually put in place a number of new activities that could allow the kids and the patient in our study to be followed up at home by sending the drugs at home, for example, and also using more frequently the nurses that were going to the house of the patients to take blood sample, for example, or measuring ECG. One important thing here is that the primary endpoint of the study is a functional test, and the functional test cannot really be done at home. So it is very important that the patient enrolled in the study will go to the site to perform the functional test at least in the last visit of the study. This is it from me. I'm ending up obviously thanking everybody, all the kids and their parents of the study that we are conducting, and also all the foundation and patient association that have been helping us in the development of Givinostat. And at the bottom, you can see a couple of addresses that you can go to get more information. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Paolo, for that presentation. That was fantastic. Now we have Anna Christensen as well joining us, and Paolo taking some questions from the audience. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat section below, and we will ask them as they come in. We do already have some questions. So this first one is, has Italfarmaco considered providing an expanded access program similar to what Synther offered for Idevidone? With the obvious benefit of just Givinostat, such a program would both help patients and establish a customer base for the product once approved.
So the situation at the moment is that obviously the patients that have been involved in our clinical trials will continue to receive treatment in the open label study until the drug is hopefully approved. Once we will read the result in the Q2 next year, we will certainly make our mind and decide on how to ensure that we can offer Givinostat to as many patients as possible.
When does Italfarmaco plan to take Givinostat to approval?
So what I can tell you is that in June 2022 we will have the results. We are already working to prepare the dossier, and so we'll probably be able to submit the dossier to the FDA and the EMA at the same time in the Q1 2023. Then obviously the following times are not under our control. It's really dependent on the FDA and the EMA.
Okay. Is there any plan to make the medicine taste better? My son talks about stopping it because it tastes so terrible.
Okay, the Givinostat is bitter. It's absolutely true. I actually did taste it, so I know that it is bitter. So I have one suggestion, which is why we are giving the drug with meal in our study. It's really to try and take it with food. Don't drink, because if you drink water together with the drug, you actually expand. So the Givinostat will touch more area of the mouth, and so the bitterness will actually increase. So ideally, take the suspension with some food, like bread, for example, and that should actually speed up the resolution of the bitterness.
Okay.
And of
Great.
course, if families on the trial learn any amazing tips that have worked really well, please share them with your sites so they can give it back to us, because we're learning all the time.
That's a great point, Anna. So another question we have, based on impressive 7-year preliminary ambulation data for Givinostat on Duchenne boys, would you consider going for approval earlier?
So we did look into that. In reality, because we did not have a placebo arm in the phase 2 study, it was very difficult for a potential accelerated approval in US and conditional approval in Europe. So we decided to remain with the phase 3 placebo control study, and then hopefully we have good results and we can proceed.
Okay.
So just to explain that a little more, if you're new to drug development, if there's families on the call that are new to drug development, what that means is they finished that original phase 2 trial and they looked at that time if it was strong enough to be able to make that case then. And the result then was that no, they really needed a trial with the placebo group. And that's why they've been running this phase 3 clinical trial. So thank you so much to everyone participating in the trial, because that's the reason they had to launch that study.
Can Givinostat be taken without steroids?
So at the moment, we have followed, if you're on the standard path of development of a drug like Givinostat, so to administer the drug on top of steroids. There are some reason to believe that it might also work without steroids, but that is if you're on a study for the future. So once we have the results, certainly we will be looking at that type of possibility.
Are any boys enrolled in Givinostat also on exon skipping approved therapies?
So at the moment, no. As you are probably aware, the regulatory authorities are very keen that we run studies that are very clean, so we can limit as much as possible concomitant medication. So obviously, steroids are mandatory, but as far as other treatment for this moment, they are not allowed. Having said that, we are all well aware that combination is a possibility, and I think every company will be looking at that once the drug is approved.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for touching that, because that was going into the next question. Do you see this working as a combination therapy type of treatment? So
this is very logical, because I mean, if you think about, we have drugs that are currently trying to restore the dystrophy, which is something that Givinostat does not do. So being able to, on one hand, restore the dystrophy, and on the other hand, also preventing the downstream effect that we observe in the muscle, is certainly very, very logical. So certainly that will be considered for the future.
The next question, and I'm going to butcher this word, so please, I apologize, everybody. With the decline of triglycerides and platelets, has the option of low iron been checked? Would giving an iron supplement or other daily supplements be good to help? Sorry about that, everybody.
So in reality, iron are not particularly important for platelets. They are certainly very important for red blood cells, but not really for platelets. So the effect on platelets is actually a pharmacological effect of the HDAC inhibitors. So Givinostat is an HDAC inhibitor, which is a group of drugs that have similar effect. And what is important here is that the effect is not, if you want, one of the potential issue could be, okay, you wipe out the platelets. No, this is not what is happening here. What is happening is that the maturation of platelets in our body that has a specific pathway is being frozen by Givinostat. So this means that once you take away Givinostat, for example, if you see that the dose is too high and the platelets go down, you can actually immediately restore the platelets to the level that they were before. So what I'm trying to say is that this is an effect that we have been studying a lot and that we know a lot about. And that can be fully managed by appropriately titrating the dose at the beginning, doing, unfortunately, more frequent lab tests at the beginning. But once the right dose is being established, then beyond that dose can be maintained for a very long time.
All right, so thank you, Susan. It's triglycerides, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah.
Sorry, everybody. Hope that clears it up.
So the triglyceride is actually a different effect. Also here, the iron will not make a difference. This is actually something that we have been studying. Is something that we have been looking at in the last couple of years, and hopefully we'll have more information the more we proceed. But also there, let me stress once again, is really in the few patients that actually have high triglyceride, you either interrupt or even straight reduce the dose, and then the triglycerides are brought back to the initial situation.
All right. Next, thank you for that. Next question is, lowered platelets, but not having to stop and reduce dose, will we remain on lowered dose always? No option to try upping it again?
So the way we are actually adjusting the dose in each kid is really to ensure that the platelets remain within the normal range. So with that in mind, and this is usually maintained throughout the study. Obviously, we know that there are some situations like potentially fever or infection where platelets may go down independently from Givinostat. That is really the reason why we are monitoring platelets throughout the study. And if that happens, then in the worst situation, if you want, you simply interrupt the treatment for a few days or a few weeks, and then you can restart.
Will Givinostat have any future clinical trials for boys that are non-ambulatory?
This is absolutely in the plan. Once again, we want to look at the results in June next year. And we are actually working to design a study also for non-ambulatory kids.
Okay, great. The next question kind of goes with the previous one, and not lowered in the beginning, but after almost 2 years on the trial for the dosing.
Say it again, sorry.
Sorry. This goes back to the previous question about the lowered platelets and the reduced dose, about opting. It's and not lowered in the beginning, but after almost 2 years on trial.
Like, does it matter when the dose reduces? Are they then stuck at a low dose forever?
Correct.
Yeah, it sounds, Paolo, I don't know if you want to comment on sort of, this might be one of those things that's the difference between a clinical trial and the way a drug might be used in the future, where in a clinical trial, there's going to be really specific rules about when you can and can't increase doses. And they're often much more picky than they are in real life. And we know that. And it's because we're designing it to be able to control for those changes when they look at the functional outcome. Is that true for this drug, Paolo? And sort of how you might think about it in life outside of a trial?
So obviously, once we have collected all the data, I mean, remember that when we will be preparing the dossier, we will have data on more than 200 kids exposed to Givinostat, some of them for many years. And obviously, some will have stayed at the original dose, some others will have reduced the dose. And so once we pull all the data together, then I think we can derive the dosing instruction for the market. Yeah. But clearly, once you derive the dosing instruction, you want to make sure that you don't have to, I don't know, measure platelets every day, because that would be feasible.
Yeah, and I think that's true for all companies developing medications and drugs for Duchenne or anything else, really, is that in the clinical trial, part of what you're testing is the way that you give an investigational product. And that's what and when a new drug gets approved, you get the package insert, that little 2-point font tissue paper thing that comes with the drug. And that gives the providers all the healthcare providers all the information they'll need to dose a drug, deal with problems, what problems can they expect, how do you adjust doses? That's all of the information the clinical trial is figuring out right now.
Okay. Thank you guys for that. Another question is, are there any plans to do a study for combination with gene therapy treatment, exon skipping, or microdystrophin?
As I was mentioning before, combination is certainly in the radar screen. Then which one will be the most appropriate combination to begin with, I think is something that we will be discussing next year.
Does Givinostat improve cardiac function in DMD?
So at the moment, we have only preclinical data, which, by the way, were published independently from us by an Italian group. They are actually quite encouraging. So using, once again, the MDX model, this group was actually able to show a benefit also on the heart. So that is certainly another aspect that we have in the radar screen that might be tested in the future. You are on mute, Danielle.
I think so, yeah. There you go.
My computer is not working today.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, these are really great questions, and thank you guys both for answering those. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to just drop them in the chat right now. You know, obviously, I think, Anna, do you mind just talking a little bit more about your contact information if any families would like to follow?
Of course. So I'm Anna Christensen. I'm the patient science liaison for the Italfarmaco program. The best way to reach us is to email us at patientadvocacy@italfarmaco.com. That goes to a group of us so that we're more likely to be able to answer you right away. And I'm happy to help connect you with any of our recorded resources or answer your questions. Of course, if you're enrolled in the study, your best bet and your first stop should always be to contact your site. They are much more able to respond to your study related issues, questions, but you know, if you get stuck, feel free to reach out.
I think that's another great point. If any families are having any difficulties, should they go to their clinic coordinator first, or should they come and email the patient advocacy team at Italfarmaco?
They should always start with your site. It's always your best bet. Those guys are set up to have 24-hour coverage and to have backups for vacations and holidays and all those kinds of things. And so they're really the most prepared. The second issue is that they also will know the history of what's been going on with you personally and be able to come up with a solution that works really well.
All right, and I think we got one last question of the day. Should we be seeing an increase in strength?
Increasing?
Strength, in muscle strength?
So this is what we hope for. One thing to keep in mind is that the assessment of strength is actually quite variable. So while I think we have standardized much more the functional test, for strength is not exactly the same thing. So I mean, based on the mechanism of action, the answer should be yes. Mm-hmm. Whether because of this variability we will be able to show that, we have to see.
And what was the test for muscle strength, Paolo?
Is dynamometer, so the handheld dynamometer.
So for families, this is your kid is pushing against a button as hard as they can. And as we all know, kids might try their best or not their best. And it's that's where some of that variability comes from. And so what that means is that when there's more variability in a test, you might not be able to scientifically answer the question of does it make you stronger? That some of the other functional tests can be able to answer the question of does it make your function different? But the strength piece, it depends a little bit on the data and how people actually do when they're doing the test.
Great, thank you guys for following up with that and all the other questions you answered. Again, I don't see any other ones coming through, but I think this was a fantastic webinar. I think a lot of great questions were asked and answered too. Again, thank you guys to the Italfarmaco team for your commitment to the Duchenne community. I think you guys do a fantastic job, and I look forward to seeing more of the things that you guys do throughout the year. Again, if any families or patients or anybody else in the Duchenne community that is looking for questions answered or have any other things that they would like to share with the Italfarmaco team, please reach out like Anna said. We look forward to hosting another webinar with you guys very soon and look forward to hopefully, when the data rolls out. But in the meantime, again, don't be strangers. And to everybody joining us today, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on another JET webinar very soon. With that being said, thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Right. Well, with that being said, we'll shut down this webinar and talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.